Hi, welcome back to Into the Cineverse. My name is Luca,
And my name is Nick.
and today we're going to talk about 10 properties we think are the most important in film.
So for this video, we came up with 5 properties each. And with each property, we came up with 5 examples of a film related to that property. Now, then we ranked them up by 10, from 10 being the least important to 1 being the most important.
Our number 10 and our number 9, it was the same for us.
Uh-huh.
So we're going to rank them both at 10 and at
That 9.
9.
So technically,
Try
this
not
is
to understand our logic,
Azat.
all right?
Technically, this is top 9, but top 10 sounds much better than
Technically,
top 10.
our 1 and 2, they're different, but we gave them the same ranking as well.
Oh yeah, then we get into that
Don't
one.
try to understand our
Yeah.
logic, all right? So we both picked cinematography.
Uh-huh.
All right. For my example of a film, I used 1917, a very brilliantly done war film, and you used.
I used Inception.
All right. So very different films when it came to the use of cinematography.
Exactly.
All right. So you want to start off?
Cinematography is something that a lot of people miss. A lot of people, when they start out, they said, okay, tripod, and that's it. That's going to be enough. But in reality, it's more interesting when the camera is moving or there is some sort of prop. The best way is when you have camera moving the in motion. And like Inception, the best why Inception for me is one of the best cinematography is because Christopher Nolan doesn't like to use CGI. He likes to use a lot of he's very physical with his films.
He's very practical.
He's very practical. And when, for example, in Inception, where there's the cafe scene and there's that huge explosion, that's real. That's no CGI. And that's one of the best things about Christopher Nolan, that his cinematography in Inception, like the cafe scene, the, it gives that sort of realism in the film.
He has a real good sense of realism because that's the thing with Christopher Nolan now, because he uses sort of realist aspects in his films, which are quite metaphysical.
Exactly.
So he's giving a sense of realism in these sort of films that are supposed to, like, not confuse you, but things that are very, how would you say, surreal. Kind
I
of.
would call it like that, yeah, kind of. And especially if you're starting out, I wouldn't worry so much about equipment. Like don't care that much that I need the best mic, I need the best camera. You can still do very well with a really cheap camera. The most important is how you use it rather than the quality. Obviously, once you start going up, you invest into a better quality camera. And for 1917, what was your
Now, me, like, it's good for you to know that I really don't like war films. Like, I get the appeal, even to certain people, and most of them, they're historic. They have a certain symbolism to the audience. I get it. I'm not really a big fan of war films.
it was
I never was.
it was surprising that you chose 1917.
But I chose it because of the cinematography. When you're there, now I saw it in the theaters, which maybe it helped in the whole experience of it all. But the direction of the film, what you're seeing on the screen, you're moving along with them. The whole plot of the film is a journey two soldiers take. They have to journey from one battalion to another in order to send a message. That's practically the whole plot of the film. But then obviously the story evolves. It's the journey that they take. It's the whole story. It's the whole plot of the film. But on the whole journey of the film, it's like you're invested with them. It's like you're traveling with them. It's like you're an invisible soldier, kind of.
Most of the shots is one shot. They don't.
Exactly.
There's only 3 cuts that he makes in
Exactly.
total film.
So everything is made in one motion. So it's like you're moving along with them. And when they're All right, for certain scenes when they're just walking about and it's a very quiet and simple scene, to the opposite when they're in the heat of battle and there are explosions everywhere and gunshots and people dying. It's like, not like, it's kind of like you're experiencing what they are experiencing. It's, as I said before, it's like you're an invisible soldier, you're kind of there and not there at the same time. And it lures you, and that's kind of the beauty of cinematography, because I think that's the whole purpose of having a well built system when it comes to cinematography. It's to like invest the audience into like kind of believing that they're part of the film, they're in the film, and they're experiencing what the characters are experiencing. So that's why I chose 1917. Moving on to our number 8, and this is your uh
Yes, acting.
yeah.
So I put acting. Acting is in number 8. Now you would say acting isn't it the most important thing about a film? Well, it is, but it's not the only thing. You can have a short film, like for example, Mr. Bean. He doesn't speak, but he has a very like his facial expression
It's
tells a story.
universal.
It's
It's
universal,
universal.
and
So
for
it goes beyond the language barrier. You know,
exactly.
everyone is going to know what it means.
And that's the thing about acting. It's not just the words that you say, it's about the expression that you give in the film. And my film that I chose for this example was The Dark Knight, for the sole reason of the Joker. Heath Ledger brought the Joker into life, and he went through so many steps to bring that Joker into life. And the way he expressed the Joker is something that no one else can.
Especially when you have two great actors working together. So, like for example, I think one of the most iconic Joker scenes in The Dark Knight is when Batman interrogates Joker.
Yes, okay.
So, in that scene, all right, Joker kind of steals the show. It's his scene, not much Batman's scene.
No, it is his scene.
But there, like Batman, Christian Bale, he really, although he's the protagonist, he complements Heath Ledger's Joker because it gives him a sort of continuation on that Heath Ledger can keep on working with what Christian Bale is giving him.
Moving on to number 7.
So number 7 is I chose storytelling. Now, storytelling, what I mean by storytelling is it's different than when you say story or the plot. So it's the way you're telling the story, it's the way it evolves. And I chose practically not just one film, I
It's
chose
a
a
franchise. You
franchise.
chose a franchise.
And I believe like Harry Potter, it's such like an iconic. It's the pinnacle example you can use when it comes to the evolution of a story, like a near perfect way of telling what a story, how it can become from like a simple origin story of the character to becoming this great hero practically. You can pick any character you want and you can see their evolution in the story and how they in the end, because of their evolution, they complement that and they evolve the story. This is how the characters and the story complement each other, because as much as the characters develop, so does the story. So there are two important characteristics that you have to have within storytelling. So as long as the story evolves, the storytelling,
Mhm.
so does the characters and vice versa. And this is where I move on to like the directors, because the approach that the Harry Potter franchise took was very interesting. So
Exactly.
like for example in the first two Harry Potter films, it was Chris Columbus. It's a very light tone. He
It,
work
wa-
he
it,
works great with kids. So that was like the angle they wanted to tackle with the first two films. But and then when we move on to the third, to the fourth, and to the rest, we see Harry and his friends mature. They're becoming teenagers. They start to tackle like things that you imagine a teenager to
Experience.
to experience. Exactly. So when they changed directors in the third film, it was Alfonso Cuaron, and he really like changed the whole tone of the film, especially because there were the Dementors. So he wanted to bring in this kind of horror esque
Uh,
feel into it. And in the fourth film with Newell, they're 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds. He wanted to tackle the kind of relationship status that teenagers feel. So, like, they're teenagers. What else are they going to talk about? They're in school, co-eds. What do you think is going to happen? Kind of. So, certain things he
bring
wanted to tackle him. It's like of,
to
although
make
it's
it
the
more
fourth,
real. Like,
exactly. So it's the fourth film, but it's still kind of a coming of age story.
oh, okay.
And then with David Yates in the final four films, we get this sense of maturity from the characters. But and then to the story as well, we see how those two characteristics, the characters and the story, complement each other into giving a really well developed and evolved method of storytelling. So that's my take on storytelling.
Number
Whew.
6 is perspective. So tell me about perspective. I was surprised when you told me about perspective. I
Right.
was, what do you mean by
What do you mean by
perspective?
perspective?
What do you mean by perspective, Luca?
All right. So perspective, it's a kind of word that, you know, it can mean many things. Depends on what you're talking about.
Okay.
And when I mean perspective, I literally mean perspective, different ways of seeing things.
So
So the
points of view.
story, exactly, the story, the character, and the film that I chose as an example for this is Joker,
The
right?
Joker, the film, not the Joker,
The,
Dark Knight Jokers.
no, no,
Just to
no,
be
no, no.
clear.
Todd
Okay.
Phillips' Joker, all right?
Okay.
Joaquin Phoenix's Joker,
Exactly.
all right? So it was beautifully made.
It
We
was.
can. And
I
it's
watched it like
so
3 times.
complex, but complex to a sense it was beautiful.
Ah.
All right. And because it keeps you intrigued, it keeps you into the story of what's going to happen
There were
in
a lot,
general and to the character.
there were a lot of semi-plot twists within throughout
Exactly.
the that
And
engaged
I'm
the
referring to
audience.
those as well. So, like, for example, first you have like different perspectives to the story. For example, we see Arthur. For example, when he meets his neighbor, I forgot her name.
I forgot, but we will
But
call her neighbor.
he imagines that he is in a relationship with his neighbor. Right.
Exactly.
But obviously, we are seeing what he is seeing. So we're seeing everything from his perspective.
And it was very surprising then after they showed that it was all in his head and the
Exactly.
neighbor doesn't really know him that well.
Exactly.
And I was like, that was all in his head. And you don't even notice it's in his head.
No, because
And
it's so well done.
and I think there's only one aspect that, for example, when he's in the talk show host, and you can tell it's in his head because he's not laughing out of sync with the audience. He's laughing with the audience, and there's sort of, you can tell it's a different
Yeah.
perspective.
So from then on, like, okay, when we find out in real time that, okay, he's not actually in a relationship with her, you start to think at that moment when you're seeing the film, okay, what's real and what isn't? Because we're seeing what he is seeing.
And even
We-
the ending is the
exactly.
most confusing part of
Exactly.
it.
That was the other point that I was going to say. When he's in the uh,
Asylum.
asylum and he's with the therapist, I imagine she was a therapist.
Uh-huh.
Like, okay, I think that was the same person who was kind of his social worker.
No, it's the same person.
Exactly.
It's the same person.
So, is she the therapist or is she the social worker? Who is she?
And I think the biggest question is if the whole story of the Joker was
If
all in his
exactly,
head
if
or
it actually
not.
happened. But and then at the end, we see him leave, and he leaves a bloody trail of footprints.
Uh-huh.
So, like, did he kill her?
You would assume that he did.
Exactly. But if he did kill her, then he has the capability of becoming Joker. So if he did kill her, did that actually happen? Did
So-
those events happen or no?
So, or you could ask, I just thought, you could ask, are those events going to happen now since he thought about it? So, like, imagine it was all in his head and now he's
Exactly.
going to do what
And
he
he's
said.
going to act on it. I
Exactly.
never thought about that.
This
See, perspective.
so, I now I get what you mean by perspective, giving different
Right.
perspectives in a film.
Then we have like perspectives to character. So this can go with evolution as well because we see Arthur, okay, imagination or not, we see the character evolve. We see him become Joker. And like, for
Ex-
example, one of my favorite scenes is that when he kills those three guys on the train
Okay.
and then he runs away and he ends up in a public restroom
And he starts dancing.
and he doesn't say anything, but he just starts exactly he just starts dancing and moving in a really weird way. The soundtrack is
Oh, the
perfect
soundtrack was
and
beautiful.
no dialogue is needed. The soundtrack says 1,000 words. He's like free. He's like it's like he's being born. Joker is being born.
I think at that point the Joker was born.
And that's what I love about Joker because you don't know what to believe. As an audience, when you're there, you don't know what to believe. That's like the magic of this film because it's one film, but you can take it in so
So
many
many different ways.
directions. Moving on to number five, and it's yours. Music. So this is your department. I don't understand anything about music.
Okay, so for just in case for people who don't know, I'm the musician here, and was this,
Absolutely not me.
c- so music, I would say, is half the film, and no film except silent films do not have music, and the best music out there is always when the music reflects and sort of explains and describes the story, the characters, the atmosphere, the environment. So you feel like you are part of the film, where words, sometimes words, and just showing it in a visual sense, you don't know what is happening. You could be seeing a still image and you could feel peaceful, you could feel distress, but with the music you know what you are expecting, you know what's you're feeling. For example, if you in a film you're in a forest, you can feel distressed if the music is suspenseful, or if the music is joyful you could feel in peace, for example. The most, I would say, the most effective way of using music in films is when you have a sort of theme for the major characters. And the one film that I used for an example for this property is Pirates of the Caribbean. It's a very great example of how music should be in films.
It's very iconic as well.
It
Like
is.
who likes not only Pirates of the Caribbean but likes film in general. Like when you hear the Pirates of Caribbean theme, you know it's the
Exactly.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Exactly. It's so memorable that if you just listen to the music, you can tell, like, that's Jack Sparrow coming. He's on the Black Pearl. You can tell, sometimes most of the times, you can tell what scene you are in by not even looking at the film, but just listening to the music. The way it develops, um, I think this is something that a lot of composers nowadays don't do. When, for example, the Jack Sparrow theme, the theme itself changes throughout the film. So, for example, where in the beginning, he is on the ship, he's feeling triumphant, he's feeling victorious. You have one way that his theme is being shown, or where he is sort of being emotional, and his theme is being shown in a different way. And where he's drunk, you can tell that the now his team is swinging, so it's like reflecting his
Always reflecting the character.
exactly. And all the time, the team doesn't technically change. You can tell the characteristics. It's Jack Sparrow, some variations here and there, but that's a good example where when you're composing for a film, that's the most important thing. It's the reflection in the music and the image, what you're seeing.
Moving on to number four, and it's mine. It's dialogue.
I must say you're very when I work with him sometimes he's very explain he likes to explain things. So he when he's telling a
I am.
story you really like to write rather than visualize it, I think. So I think for you,
As
dialogue
in,
is very
dialogue is
in,
very important. I always enjoy describing things, but and then I like visualizing them
oh,
as
okay.
well. So, like for example, if I ever end up working on a set, I think that would be my favorite thing. Is like working on the props
Oh, okay.
and doing like the background and using the prop practically as my canvas, as like symbolizing thing. But one of my favorite thing is the dialogue, and the film that I use is actually this is my favorite film of all
I
time.
never watched it, but you sent me some
So
clips, and I on think the second clip where
mhm,
he is in the office
mhm.
with both of them, not on the bench. I teared up at the end.
I always do. So
You know,
okay,
you will
I'm
explain
going to
which scene.
mention which one it is. So if we ever do a segment, an episode where we mention like our top 5 favorite films or whatever, this is going to be my number one. I don't think it's ever going to change. My favorite film is Good Will Hunting. Now, most people don't know about this film.
I didn't know
Like
about
I
this
ask
film.
people, like when we're talking about films, and they ask me, "Yeah, what's your favorite film?" I tell them Good Will Hunting. Like,
It's like, what
what
is
is it?
Goodwill Hunt?
I
I
never, I
that
never
was
heard
my
of it.
first reaction, to be honest.
Like, and I kind of feel bad because I think, in my opinion, they missed out on a very well done piece of cinema, in my
Okay.
opinion. So, yeah, any Good Will Hunting fans out there, please leave a like. Don't make me feel bad, but fine. Yeah, Good Will Hunting is my favorite film, and one of the, I think, the best thing about this film, out of the characters, the actors, the lesson that you practically learn from this film, it's the dialogue. The dialogue is the best piece about this film. Ben Affleck and Matt Damon made this film, and they got nominated for best, I think original, yes, best original screenplay
Okay.
at,
That's
for the Oscars, and they won. They won an Oscar for this, so you can imagine how good the dialogue is. That's
exactly.
the essence of the screenplay. And the most important aspect of the dialogue that I loved in this film, that it's so powerful. It conveys so many messages. And there are two scenes that I really love in this film, and the two scenes that I sent you.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's the scene. So for any people who ever saw Good Will Hunting, you know
You
what
most probably
scenes
want to
I'm
know what.
referring to. For those of you who never saw Good Will Hunting, go see it, please. So apart from the casting, which was brilliantly done, the dialogue is so powerful, and in these two scenes, so Robin Williams' character plays a therapist, and he needs to help Matt Damon's character, he's this genius, and he's been through so much, and he gets you the story about the things that his character went through, and
He had family problems. I
exactly,
saw
and you
the
try to
flashbacks.
sympathize with him, and through the dialogue that he has with Robin Williams' character, both in a scene when they're out on a bench, and Robin Williams' character is practically just telling him, "Listen, I know you're this genius, but then again, you're not special. Like, don't think you are this special person just because you are a genius." And it's like he kind of puts him in his place, but he's guiding him at the same time. And in the second scene, they're in his office. This is like near the end of the film. He's supposed to, Robin Williams' character is supposed to fill in this report to send back to court to tell him that he went through therapy and stuff. So it's a very emotional scene, and all of it comes down to the dialogue, because we see Robin Williams' character always telling him, "It's not your fault, it's not your
That's
fault."
like literally just a few words, one sentence,
Exactly.
repeated
But
over and over
exactly. And
again.
like for a moment, like when I was seeing it the first time, how many times are you going to say this? But and then I saw why. And
He
this
was trying to get it into his
exactly.
head because
And
it
this
was
is the
rejecting
power
it.
of words. Words can be a powerful weapon, a powerful tool. And they get through Matt Damon's character, they get through Will. His walls come down. Words can be such a powerful tool. And I think this is one of the most important characteristics when it comes to film. It's the dialogue, because that's one of the most things that the audience is going to relate to, that's going to grab them. And when you have these scenes with very powerful dialogue, you can hook the audience, no problem. You make them feel what the characters in that scene are feeling.
we're so based on the visuals nowadays that good films that are surrounded by good dialogue is becoming less and less nowadays.
Moving on to number three, which is concept.
So that's mine. So concept. When I say concept, I mean sort of ideas, a message. So and what do you want to tell the audience? What do you want to show the audience? Now it could be a message of hope. It could be something, for example, I want to have this idea to relate a film on a specific idea. And for the to tell it better, my example was Tenet, and it's a recent film.
I've just realized that most of your films are Christopher Nolan
I really
films.
love Christopher Nolan because I like concepts in films.
Christopher Nolan, if you're watching, your biggest fan, right?
Okay, I don't think I am the biggest, but I am a huge fan of Christopher Nolan.
Yeah. Now
And
put Christopher Nolan as your face on the video.
so the concept of Tenet is time in reverse. So objects that have a reverse polarity, that instead, for example, if you want to throw something, instead of throwing it, it comes back to you.
If it's inverted.
So it's an inverted
Object.
object. And they use not just for objects, they even for people. So it's the timeline is very confusing. I had to go watch a YouTube video that shows the whole timeline of everything. And they use the scientific theory to sort of learn the future. So then when they come back to the present, they know what's going to happen and they can act on it. And one of the villains, that's how he became rich and that's how he works. And that's how he knows everything, basically, know what's going to happen. Because there are people going in reverse and he's seeing what's happening already. And concepts like these are so, they're not totally realistic, but they're based on real theories. And I feel that these concepts in films sort of brings a new fresh light to filming. And in a film, I think one of the things that you really need to think about is what's my concept of this film? What do I want to tell this audience? What do I want to show the audience? Besides the story, because then the story is like the relationship between the characters. And it can be a simple story, but if you don't have a good concept, your whole production, the whole film, it's going to mean nothing. You can do so much with a film that if the concept isn't well done, the whole I would say the whole film would just feel pointless. Off to number 1 and 2, which we couldn't decide if it was 1 or 2, because
Exactly.
for us this is both top
Again,
one.
don't try and understand our logic.
So
right?
in what we've done is that these two concepts, they are between, so you can choose if it's top 1 for you or top 2. It doesn't matter.
Whatever.
Both for us, these are top ones. So whatever, you just
Or
see
at
how you
least
see.
I think they're the most important
Exactly.
aspects when
So
it comes to filming, in our opinion.
in our opinion, exactly. So since I talked already,
Alright,
tell
I'll
yours.
go. So my property as number 1/number 2, however you want to put
Whatever.
it, right? It's balance. When I say balance, I'm referring to the whole lot when it comes to the film.
Mhm.
But practically, first off, okay, every film is going to have its base genre. So it can be an action film, it can be a sci-fi film, it can be a horror film, whatever. So it's always going to have its base genre. But and then I think you should always like seep different aspects from different genres. So you get more than one genre into the film. You get what I mean?
Yeah, I'm getting what you mean.
So like you should never forget its base. So if it's like it's a horror film, it's a horror film first and foremost.
But like you can put elements of comedy or some action in it.
Exactly. So like for example, it just came to me now. You ever saw the first Conjuring film?
Yeah.
So when the mother
Uh-huh.
of the family, she hears a noise from the basement
Uh-huh.
and she walks in and she tells them, whoever is down here, I'm going to lock you in. And then she turns around and the door slams in her face and she falls down. I found that very funny, but it's very comedic. It's very comedic,
A lot of
at
people.
least for me.
Okay,
Or
okay.
I've showed everyone that I'm a psychopath.
I think at this point, you're showing your psycho side.
It's a very, all right, it's not a very funny scene, but it's very comedic. Or like for example in Joker, when it's a very dramatic thriller film, but when he's near the end, when he's in his apartment, he's getting ready to go for
At
the
the show.
show,
Okay.
and two people show up. He
His
kills one of
coworker.
them.
You found that funny.
No, not that.
Okay.
Not that. And one of them is a short person.
All right. Okay.
I don't know the politically correct term for it. Uh, he's a short person, right? And he lets him leave because he was one of the few people that was actually nice to him. And he goes to the door and he couldn't reach the doorknob. So everyone started to think, okay, he's going to kill him because he went back and asked him, listen, can you open the door?
And
It,
then,
it, it was a very like at first it was a very thrilling scene
but then
because you
that
think
turned
he's
out.
going to kill him because it quickly turns dramatic and then he lets him leave.
Okay, I did
When I
laugh.
was in the theater,
I,
everyone began laughing. Okay,
okay,
it
okay,
wasn't only me.
okay.
All right, so
To be honest, I have to be
listen,
honest
if
that I
I'm a
did.
psycho, 400 other people were also psychotic,
To be honest,
right?
I did laugh at that point.
And not only comedic moments, but any other sort of genre, at least a little bit, in order to make the film more interesting. So it won't only be one directional in a way.
You have so
So
many things coming in
exactly,
that it
but
sort of
it
balances
will
it
always
out.
have a base. It will always have a base.
Yeah, then
And the film I use as an example is Knives Out. Most probably, there are a lot of people who saw Knives Out because it was
besides me.
besides you, but it was a success. It was a very big success, and the sequel is coming out this year. It's a very like classic murder mystery, a classic whodunit.
Okay.
So the base genre of it, it's a mystery film, but it has many different elements. It's very dramatic, funny. There's one scene you can describe it as slightly horror because how they filmed it, it had a horror-esque feel to it. It wasn't full on
Uh-huh.
horror. In Knives Out, it seeped different genres without forgetting its base. So that is like a very important aspect. And the other things that I will mention is apart from like getting different aspects of genre into it without forgetting its base genre,
Mm-hmm.
it has the other traits that I mentioned,
Okay.
which are important. So, like for example, storytelling. The story evolved really well. You don't know which direction it's going, and the different acts of genre helped it in a way. It helped it evolve, but not evolve straight.
Roller
I
coaster
would
kind.
exactly. You don't know where the story is going, and they use different genres in order to support that.
So they use
If you see the film, you know what I'm
so
referring
like
to.
if using different genres to tell different aspects of the story, kind of.
Exactly.
Your
Dialogue as well. It's so well written, and I think that okay, I don't believe in perfection, right? There's nothing perfect in the world.
there's always something you can
Near
improve.
perfect, yes. And I don't know if I'm going to get hate for this. I really don't care. It's my opinion. But if you tell me, like, in your opinion, what's a near perfect film, I would say Knives Out.
Okay.
Uh, Because it was so well done. It had a balance of everything you could imagine. And ending on our final one, it's yours.
Which is story. When coming up with a film, I think the first thing for me would be the story. What are the characters? What's the world? And I really love creating worlds. Can be in the real world or it could be sort of fantasy. I'm a very huge fan when it comes to fantasy films. And the great thing about fantasy films is the story, the characters, the world itself, and all those properties in a film. My film for this example would be Lord of the Rings. I think from Harry Potter, Star Wars, and Lord of the Rings does great job. I think it's the best one in when it comes to fantasy films. And when it comes to story, I do like Lord of the Rings better than Harry Potter. This is obviously my opinion. Okay, sorry, don't hate on me, but I do prefer Lord of the Rings. And for the reason of because it's the story. The story, if you sort of try to outline the story is basically I need to take a ring, I need to take this ring into Mordor and destroy it. That's the outline, that's the basic sort of story of Lord of the Rings from point A to point B. But then there's this elements that sort of develops the characters. There are obstacles. What can I do to make it interesting? And all these points in during the three films that sort of engages the audience and make it interesting. And one of the things that I love about the story, I would say the world development. Part of the story, I feel that the world development is part of the story. And you have elves, you have goblins, you have orcs, you have hobbits, and you have dwarves. All that is so well presented and so well ingrained in the story that you have the lore. You have so much lore behind it all. Obviously, in the film, in the three films, they're not going to state all of the lore. You have to go read the lore yourself. But it's so well written, it's so well thought of. The outline of the story is simple, but they put in so much into it. That's the best thing when you're building a story. Have a simple outline and start putting in details about the story. Without a good story, the rest won't matter. The rest will not make sense.
Like, for example, for my case, what I was saying is, but first you have to have a genre.
You
That
can't.
was my argument. Like, the genre has to come first. You have to base your story first on a genre,
All right.
on what you're tackling. And then from then on, with the use of the genre, you can evolve your story. You can make it better.
But my argument why it should be number one is because whatever genre you do, the most important is how do you create a story related to the genre. So
You can
both
take it either way.
exactly it both are important, and you still need both of them. You can decide which one is number one for you.
Exactly.
So that was our 10 list of properties that are the most important in filming and to our opinions. There are so many aspects out there. There are so many other properties and features about film that come into it that I think they're still important, but not as important than these ones, because sort of you can still do without the others. You know, for example, as I mentioned before in the beginning, you can still do with a cheap quality camera. For example, the cinematography, you can have a cheap camera, but you still can have a great cinematography. I think these 10 are the fundamentals in filming and what makes a great film.
So this brings an end
Yes.
to this episode. So please like,
Comment
comment, and
and
subscribe.
subscribe.